When was the last time you saw Merry Christmas? You don't see it anymore. They want to be politically correct. If I'm president, you're going to see Merry Christmas in department stores, believe me. Believe me.
All right, that was candidate Donald Trump in January 2016, promising to win the war on Christmas and do it, as he likes to say, big league or big league. It depends on who you're asking. Like these cards that he sent to lawmakers this week. Beside a pro-Trump super PAC releasing this ad in time for the holidays.
Thank you, President Trump, for letting us say Merry Christmas again.
Oh, okay. So is President Trump winning the so-called war on Christmas? To answer that, we brought back our panel fully revved up and ready to go. Vince Colonnese, editorial director for the Daily Caller, and Isaac Wright, the former executive director of a pro-Hillary Clinton super PAC. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Nice to be back.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, so thank you. Look at that. All right, I'm going to take you right to the polls here. All right, this one is from the Pew organization, about how people feel like businesses should greet them, because this has been a big thing over the last few years. 52% say it doesn't matter to them. They don't care. 32% do prefer Merry Christmas. 15% say Happy Holidays. Those are businesses. There have been boycotts on businesses, as you two may know, over the last few years over what they choose to say. Vince, does it matter to you?
It matters. I think it matters insofar as we as Americans sort of recognize sort of like the soft undercurrent to our conversations, what's actually happening as people say that. And you hear Happy Holidays, and I think a lot of people think to themselves like, well, what you're trying to do is not offend anybody by saying that. And the key really should be like, well, stop taking Christ out of Christmas. I mean, really, the whole holiday season really revolves around December 25th, Christ's birthday, and people like to be reminded of that. And when they hear Donald Trump say Merry Christmas, it really is not about necessarily just a war on Christmas. It's about the war on Christianity. They'd like to make sure that Christianity continues to be a dominant force in America because, you know, it has been since our founding.
Well, I do think a lot of us are worried. We don't want to offend anyone, but this is interesting, too. This is from Monmouth University poll. This is from this year about what holidays Americans are celebrating right now. 89% of Americans say they are going to celebrate Christmas. 5% say they are actively celebrating Hanukkah. 3% say Kwanzaa. So if you've got 89% of the country saying, hey, we're going to celebrate Christmas, Isaac, why do you think people are so worried about offending someone?
So this is something Vince and I can actually agree on. I think there is a war right now on Christian values. I actually don't think it's about our holiday greeting and our Christmas greeting. I think that's kind of a distraction. And I think the right wing has sort of created this ruse of a quote-unquote war on Christmas about department store greetings as a way to distract from what Jesus taught and how we actually act on that or not in this country. In the 25th chapter of Matthew, Jesus, whose birthday we're talking about, said, the sheep and the goats will be separated. We as believers will be separated based on how we followed his teachings about how we treat the poor, how we treat the sick, and how we treat the foreigner amongst us. Those were the things that Jesus cited as to what believers will be judged on. And if you look at the policies that have been pushed in the last year in this country, they're the most anti-Jesus teaching policies.
Wait, so we're going from a debate over Happy Holidays and Merry Christmas right back into politics.
That's not politics for me. That's
No,
what
no,
Jesus
that
said.
part is
That's,
politics.
I'm pretty sure, but I'm pretty sure Jesus.
That's where
policy,
faith.
but you took it to policy.
Jesus wasn't saying that we need government.
Some of us about why we believe these things. Some of us believe our country should reflect the values of what Jesus taught about how we treat the sick, how we treat the.
We think of Christmas, of course, as the commemoration of Jesus' birth, which it is in part. But the festival, as we know it, is just as much, if not more, a product of ancient Roman paganism.
Every winter, from at least the 2nd century BC and likely many centuries before then, the ancient Romans held a major festival called the Saturnalia. During this celebration, among other things, the Romans had huge parties. They decorated their houses with greens and gave each other gifts. Saturnalia began on December 17th and lasted about a week. It was followed on December 25th by the birth date of the pagan god Mithras, a celebration known as the birth of the unconquered sun. That was followed a couple days later by their New Year celebration called the Calends. It was an extremely popular time of year across the Roman Empire.
The Christians, meanwhile, in the first century, in the beginning of the second century, think the world's going to end soon, like Wednesday at noon. And so they're not really worried about festivals and holidays and commemorating events in Jesus' life because, well, we've got 2 weeks to go, or maybe 2 years, but not very long. The decades go by, and they start thinking, well, the world isn't going to end quite so quick after all. And then they start thinking about, well, and this is partially, by the way, because they live in the Roman pagan empire, in which the rhythm of the year is partially agricultural, but it's also partially religious, and they're part of that rhythm as well. Then they start thinking about, well, we need to commemorate things in our lives too. We need to have a sort of religious rhythm of the year as a substitute for the pagan rhythm of the year. And one of the obvious candidates for this is, well, when was Jesus born?
Of the two Gospels that tell the story of the birth of Christ, neither one mentions the month or the year that the event happened. So as a result, the early Christians have to come up with a date of their own. For a number of reasons, a couple of options are thrown out there, including May 20th, March 25th, and of course, December 25th.
How did December 25th win out? Well, we don't know exactly, but most likely what's going on is the church is living in this pagan environment, and it's trying to keep people within the church. It's trying to attract more people. And the most beloved event in the pagan calendar, the most beloved festival, is this Saturnalia, plus the birth of the unconquered sun on December 25th, plus the Calends, this wonderful liberating festival in the bleak, dark, dismal, dead winter. And what we think happened, though we have no direct evidence, is essentially they decide, well, we're going to go head-to-head. We're going to compete. We'll pick December 25th, not to avoid the pagan holiday, but to go right up against it. And it wouldn't be anything they'd be ashamed of. You can almost imagine a meeting of bishops saying, well, let's not dodge. Let's go head-to-head. Let's compete in the marketplace. Let's show our stuff, because we think we've got something better for people.
Timothy O'Donnell says a lot of those traditions found in festivals like Saturnalia were perfect tools that early Christians could use to draw people into their religion. Much of the pagan symbolism was baptized, in a sense, by the Christians and recast to illustrate the power they saw in Jesus Christ.
The Romans would light their houses and, give gifts, and different ranks were put aside. It harkened back to a golden time. Well, of course, for the Christians, to associate something like that, a golden time where gifts would be given, the gift of God giving His Son, the Christ, the light, that you would put lights in homes or illuminate them with oil lamps, this would all be sort of a natural thing, that would just fit in so beautifully with the light coming into the midst of darkness. And since December is sort of the darkest month, the shortest day of the year, December 25th is when the sun clearly is on a rebound and the days are just starting to get longer. So it would easily identify, not in a pagan way, but in the sense of the sun as a symbol of Christ. You see what I'm saying? And then all the gift-giving and everything that was part of the Roman celebration of Saturnalia would have been a big part of that as well.
So the complication and how it affects Christmas as we know it is, it would be nice to be able to say to the folks who are celebrating the Saturnalia and the birthday of the unconquered sun, well, now you're Christians, you're going to celebrate though in a completely different way, and all of that stuff that you thought was fun, the gambling and the drinking and the carousing in the street and the role reversal and the social subversiveness, all of that's gone now, forget about it. Well, it doesn't work that way, needless to say. You can't wash all that out of the holiday. And so what happens is, when the church decides on December 25th and tries to substitute the birth of Christ, Christmas essentially, for the birth of the unconquered sun, Mithras, some of that celebration gets dragged into Christmas. And so things that we do today as part of Christmas,
that the celebration of Christmas and the bringing forth of the Christmas tree into your home and decorating the Christmas tree, did you know that that actually is a celebration of the memorial of the fall of man? It's a memorial service. And every time people celebrate Christmas, every time they decorate those Christmas trees, they're actually celebrating the fall of man. Consider this. Here are some of the basic things that goes into the decoration of the Christmas tree. Number one, the ornaments. Number two, the tinsels. The tinsel is what wraps around the tree. Number three, you've got a star, or number four, you have an angel. Now, it's either a star or an angel. These two are interchangeable. Number four or number five, you have the Christmas tree skirt. The Christmas tree skirt is something that is placed at the very bottom of the Christmas tree. Now, here's the point that I'm trying to make. How do these things work, or how do they look on the Christmas tree, and how does it actually point us in the direction of the fall of man? It's quite interesting and quite fascinating that this Christmas tree is being adorned or decorated just as if it was to be a representative of a woman. Now, a woman in Bible prophecy in the Bible represents a church. A church can be interchangeably used with the word congregation. So we can look at the Christmas tree and we can be able to say that that seems to be pointing to a congregation. Now, it may not make sense right now, but hold that thought. What coils around the tree? That's right, the tinsel. The tinsel coils around the tree until it gets to the very top, to the very pinnacle of the tree. At the very top of this tree, what do you have? Well, at the very pinnacle of this tree, at the very top of this mount of this congregation, is an angel or a star. Did you know that stars represent angels? It seems to suggest that whoever gave the idea, whoever instituted the idea of placing a star above this Christmas tree or an angel, they knew what they were doing. They knew exactly that a star represents an angel and vice versa. Now, there's something that coils around the tree, and around it are balls. These balls are the ornaments. They come in different colors. These actually point to a certain forbidden fruit. At Eden, it was a woman, Eve, who went and spoke to a serpent. The serpent was coiled around the tree, and the serpent beguiled the woman and deceived her and caused her to eat of that forbidden fruit. A coiling serpent that coils around the tree, that serpent is also known as Satan, the dragon. In the book of Isaiah chapter 14, the Bible says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north." Pause. It's not by coincidence. Satan desires to be at the very top, at the very pinnacle of the congregation. The congregation, as I mentioned, a church represents a woman, or a woman represents a church in the Bible, which means that a woman represents a congregation. Now, the Christmas tree, it's decorated just like how women are decorated. Now, it's quite interesting that it also has a skirt. Our Christmas tree has a skirt. That is all symbolic language. It talks about the congregation. If you consider it carefully, anyone who celebrates Christmas and they bring the Christmas tree into their homes, they are participating in the memorial service of the fall of men. That was when we died. That was when the human race died. And that was what led also to the death of the Lamb of God, slain from the foundation of the world.
Those are drawn in. Some of these other elements, like getting drunk and going out on the streets and doing who knows what, that kind of comes along as well.
Often when we think about Santa Claus, we think, ho, 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 Merry Christmas, you know, this Caucasian guy with a white beard and white hair, and he's an old man, and he loves the children, he loves making toys for them. But when you actually look back, of course it goes back to paganism. Everybody even knows that it goes back to paganism. But the thing is, it goes back to such Egyptian gods like Bez, and then another Roman god, who was a god who would make toys for children, supposedly, right? Make toys for children, and then it would be in December some year, in a year where this god would come and visit the children and give them gifts, and he would know if they were good and bad. So all these names that we call Santa, Kris Kringle, you know, Saint Nick, it's actually pretty much, it's mocking Christ in a way, because it actually is using the name of Christ in there, but it's a counterfeit. So it's a counterfeit Christ. And when the Dutch actually came over to America, what happened is that they bring those European pagan traditions that they had back in the old world, they bring it to America. So when they settled down, they bring over those roots, and they bring over those traditions, and pretty much it indoctrinated, you know, the Americans. They adopted the name Santa Claus, or, you know, the name that we use nowadays. But I mean, we often tell our children, don't tell lies. But then on one day a year, parents excuse themselves to tell a lie about an old man who's gonna, you know, come with his reindeer on your rooftop and visit you. Just leave him some milk and cookies, leave him some treats, and he'll visit you. But you know, we got to look back at the pagan roots of it, because it's steeped in paganism, it's steeped in tradition. It goes back, you know, in the Roman Catholic Church, bring it even more to prominence nowadays. Now it's known all around the world, and almost everybody celebrates Christmas and even Santa Claus.
When was Jesus born? It is well known among biblical scholars that Jesus was not born in December, because the shepherds were never out in the fields with their sheep at that time. They were in the same country, shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. Luke chapter 2 verse 8. Shepherds always brought their sheep in from the mountainsides and field and corralled them not later than October 15th to protect them from the cold, rainy season that followed. You may find this in Songs chapter 2 verse 11, that's Song of Solomon, and Ezra chapter 10 verse 9 and 13. It was an ancient custom among Jews of those days to send out their sheep to the fields and deserts about the Passover, early spring, and bring them home at commencement of the first rain. During the time they were out, the shepherds watched them night and day. As the first rain began early in the month of March, which answers to part of our October, we find that the sheep were kept out in the open country during the whole summer. And as these shepherds had not yet brought home their flocks when Christ was born in Bethlehem, it is a presumptive argument that October had not yet commenced, and that consequently our Lord was not born on the 25th of December, when no flocks were out in the fields, nor could he have been born later than September, as the flocks were still in the fields by night. On this very ground, the nativity in December should be given up. The feeding of the flocks by night in the fields is a chronological fact. You'll find this from the Talmudist in Lightfoot, Adam Clark Commentary, Volume 5, page 370.
Well, look, you know, when you think about the mistletoe is pretty funny, because what happened is the Druids, the Romans, and the other ancient pagan civilization, what would happen with them is that they would actually see the mistletoe in the winter, and because all the other leaves and plant life would fade away for the winter, but they would actually see the mistletoe still remaining. And the interesting part is that they would liken this to immortality and fertility and these kind of things, and it would be used to symbolize those things. And later on, what actually began to happen is that with the mistletoe is that when, say, two opposing forces would come to war against each other or something like that, if they met and they were and somehow they met for battle and they were under a mistletoe, they had to cease actually going to war against each other for that day, and they had to pretty much have like a peace treaty, because the mistletoe symbolized peace as well. And then, you know, later on, what happened is that there was actually a pagan god. He was the god of the forest, and he actually was killed by a spear that was made out of mistletoe, and his mother somehow, this is what the tradition is, his mother was able to resurrect him, rebirth him pretty much, and it became even a symbol of love, symbol of sacrifice, pretty much, like loving sacrifice, pretty much. And so this is why people have actually began to kiss under the mistletoe, is because they look at it as a symbol of love, not knowing that paganism is stooped in paganism. And same even with the Christmas tree. We look at the Christmas tree, but and it's obviously the fir tree or the pine tree, and with that, because it stays green all year round, it's again looked at as immortality. It's looked at even as a form of a symbol of their sun worship, because what was placed at the top of the tree, what was placed at it was a 8-point star symbolizing the sun. And often, pagans would use the trees, and they would carve the trees, and they would deck them with silver and gold, and they would begin to worship it. Not the tree specifically, but whatever they used the tree to form out of, a bird, an animal, whatever it is, they would use these different things, and they would worship those things formed from the tree. And what happened, and with the Christmas tree, it even has these, people often decorate it with these gold and silver balls, but that was actually goes back to paganism too. They would symbolize it as the sun god's testicles. I mean, these things are very crazy when you think about it, but it's very true if you go back and you look at the origins there, even with the mistletoe and the Christmas tree. Just people look at these things very innocent, but it's stooped in paganism, and the symbology is not even in a Christ-like form. So we gotta be watchful.
What is Christmas? The word Christmas means Mass of Christ, or, as it came to be shortened, Christmas. It came to the modern world from the Roman Catholic Church. Unfortunately, they did not get it from the Bible, but from paganism. Hear this. Christmas was not among the earliest festivals of the Church. The first evidence of the feast is from Egypt. Pagan customs centering around the January calends, the pagan calendar, gravitated to Christmas. This is from the Catholic Encyclopedia, 1911. Origen, an early Christian writer, said this about celebrating birthdays in the Bible. In the scriptures, no one is recorded to have kept the feast or held a great banquet on his, Christ's, birthday. It is only sinners like Pharaoh or Herod who made great rejoicings over the day in which they were born into this world. This is taken from Origen, quoted in the Catholic Encyclopedia, 11th edition, Nato Dei. So how did Christmas get into the Christian Church? In one brief paragraph, the new Schaff-Herzog Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge tells us how the December 25 holiday entered the Christian Church. How much the date of the festival depended upon the pagan Brumalia, the December 25 celebration, following the Saturnalia, an 8th day, December 17th to 24th festival preceding it, and celebrating the shortest day of the year and the new sun, cannot be accurately determined. The pagan Saturnalia and Brumalia were too deeply entrenched in popular custom to be set aside by Christian influence. The pagan festival, with its riot and merrymaking, was so popular that Christians were glad of an excuse to continue its celebration with little change in spirit and in manner. Christian preachers of the West and the Near East protested against the unseemly frivolity with which Christ's birthday was celebrated, while Christians of Mesopotamia accused their Western brethren of idolatry and sun worship for adopting as Christian this pagan festival. New Knowledge on Christmas. Church leaders adopted a pagan holiday in spite of the protest of some godly local pastors. It was considered idolatry to do this, since it was nothing more than a heathen day of worship. In addition, the day for this worship had been selected in honor of Mithra, the sun god. December 25 was dedicated to the keeping of his birthday. Therefore, sincere Christians considered it to be a form of sun worship. The sun had reached its lowest angle in the sky on December 21st, the winter solstice, and the 25th was the first observable day in which it began rising in the noon sky. So December 25th had, for centuries, been celebrated as the birth of the sun god. But, back in those earlier centuries, earnest believers recognized that Christians dare not accept pagan practices or pagan holidays. These heathen customs are not found in the Bible as being used by Christians, so they ought to be shunned by conscientious Christians. The Roman world was essentially pagan. Many converts to Christianity had come to enjoy these festivities and did not want to forsake them after baptism into the Christian church. But when half-converted church members rose to positions of leadership in the church, they made policy changes in agreement with contemporary heathen customs. Christmas counterfeits of Christ. Santa comes in the night versus Christ comes as a thief in the night. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 10, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 2. Santa dressed in white and red versus Christ clothed in white and red. Revelation 19 verse 13 and 14, Isaiah 63 verse 1 to 3. Santa brings gifts and rewards versus Christ brings gifts and rewards. Romans 6 verse 23, Revelation 22 verse 12. Santa knows if you've been good or not versus Christ knows. Revelation 2 verse 23. Santa has white curly hair versus Christ in Revelation chapter 1 verse 14 has white hair. Santa sits and talks with children versus Christ talks with children, Matthew 19 verse 14. Santa comes with a reindeer versus Christ comes with horses, Revelation 19 verse 11 and 14. Santa comes with a sleigh versus Christ comes with chariots, Isaiah 66 verse 15. Santa lives at the North Pole versus Christ lives on the sides of the north, Psalm 48 verse 2. Santa have children tell him what they want versus Christ, we pray to him, Matthew 7 verse 7. Santa Claus is not real, only imaginary versus we should not take part in lies, Revelation 22 verse 14 to 15.
Christmas, or should we say December 25th? You know, growing up, I remember Christmas as quite a happy time. You know, it was something that as children we always looked forward to. And it was a time where, you know, the snow is falling, everything was just painted really pretty white, and, you know, everything was cold, but at the same time, you know, as children we really enjoyed tobogganing and doing a lot of the things that that children did at that time who grew up and really enjoyed that holiday. We would go and see Candy Cane Lane. You know, we really went full throttle when it came to Christmas. If there is any other holiday that I could remember just waking up and being so excited about, it would definitely be Christmas. You know, we didn't do the mistletoe thing too much. I didn't quite understand it when I was younger, but I did understand that when Christmas Eve came around, I couldn't wait to open up one present. It was one present that we would get to open up on Christmas Eve. And the next day we would be opening up all of our presents, so that was really exciting. Yeah, it was a really good feeling to have the family, like the whole family, just, you know, anticipating what gift are you gonna, you know, what gift are you gonna get? What gift is gonna be in that wrap, you know? So that was exciting. You know, my brothers, we all were a big family, but at the same time, you know, we did care for one another. I would say we were quite tight-knit, you know, as children. We had our sort of kind of cliques in the house. Like my brothers would kind of be, you know, their own little group, and then me and my sister, Tia, we would be in our own little section there, but at the same time we were one big family. We loved each other, and you know, I grew up with my stepdad, and I think one year he even decided to play Santa. We couldn't wait for, you know, to set these cookies. I remember that we would set these cookies, we would set these cookies out by the fireplace, and we couldn't wait to know that Santa had gotten to them. You know, when we would wake up, we would see the cookies gone. We'd say, Santa came, you know, he ate the cookies. And that was pretty cool to think about, that, you know, Santa had come into my home and, you know, he went down my fireplace. Like, how did he do that, you know? He's a much bigger man, and that chimney is, like, quite small, so it always kind of intrigued me. You know, we did grow up believing in a Santa Claus. That was always something, you know, as we got older, we would have to kind of, you know, as we figured out and realized, you know, Santa is not real, that was kind of like a heartbreaker, you know. And so as we grew older, we would kind of keep that from the little ones. I am from a family of 7, so, well, now, but growing up, it was always us 5 children. It was me, Tia, Tariq, Dante, Keon, and now we have Kaishan and Naraya, which is, you know, has been such a blessing. But, you know, from being a little girl and growing up in a bigger family, you know, there was always memorable parts about Christmas. You know, we were excited about the gifts, excited about unraveling them, wondering, you know, what gift is that going to be, you know, feeling the little box and trying even peek at your presents, you know, ripping the little corner kind of thing. That's what we would always kind of do. You know, we would get in trouble for it, but we still made our attempts. And another thing I really do remember is like the gingerbread houses, you know, getting creative like that. My mom was always, still is really creative person, and we enjoyed Candy Cane Lane. We enjoyed a lot of decorations. Decorating the Christmas tree is another one that we really enjoyed growing up. I remember my stepdad or whoever was like strong enough at the time, they would lift us up and we would put that angel on top of the Christmas tree. So that's a very memorable experience for me. As far as Christmas went for me, in my home, it was a very warm atmosphere, you know, and family was always good, and, you know, that'll always be a good memory for me. Although we don't, me and my husband, my family, we personally don't celebrate these things in the sense that we do the whole Christmas tree and everything like that, you know, because we try to differentiate ourselves from the world. And as our children get bigger, I've wondered to myself, you know, like, how are we gonna make this holiday a special holiday in terms of, you know, children start acknowledging like what's going on around them. And I definitely think that we'll still keep in the spirit of giving, and we'll keep in the spirit of, you know, just letting the children go out and do evangelism and still giving.
What the Lord says about Christmas in Spirit of Prophecy. Dear sister, the gifts and offerings which ought to find their way into the Lord's treasury have been diverted into human channels. I presented to the church how important it was that a change should be made in our customs, habits, and practices. In this direction, Especially Christmas gifts should be made to Him who has made such infinite sacrifice to save fallen man. Letter 59, 1893. Shall we have a Christmas tree? God would be well pleased if on Christmas each church would have a Christmas tree on which shall be hung offerings, great and small, for these houses of worship. Letters of inquiry have come to us asking, shall we have a Christmas tree? Will it not be like the world? We answer, you can make it like the world if you have a disposition to do so, or you can make it as unlike the world as possible. There is no particular sin in selecting a fragrant evergreen and placing it in our churches, but the sin lies in the motive which prompts to action and the use which is the made of the gifts placed upon the tree. The Adventist Home, page 482. Provide innocent enjoyment for the day. Will you not arise, my Christian brethren and sisters, and gird yourselves for duty in the fear of God, so arranging this matter that it shall not be dry and uninteresting, but full of innocent enjoyment, that shall bear the signet of heaven? I know the poorer class will respond to these suggestions. The most wealthy should also show an interest and bestow their gifts and offerings proportionate to the means with which God has entrusted them. Let there be recorded in the heavenly book such a Christmas as has never yet been seen, because of the donations which shall be given for the sustaining of the work of God and the upbuilding of His kingdom. The Adventist Home, page 483.
Poetry Love Media would like to wish you all season greetings and a Happy New Year. God bless.